Hello and welcome to Euphoria. In this video I'd like to develop some ideas for the next steps in building my Lego city. I'll give you a quick look at the current state of the city and start considering how I can develop it further. I've got some clear ideas about how I want the structure of the city to develop, but I need to work through quite a few ideas and options about how I develop the city from how it is now. On the way, I'll be using some of the techniques I've developed for the initial planning of my Lego city layout. My Lego city uses a mixture of Lego modular buildings from the Creator Expert Modular Buildings range, my own designs for buildings, and lots of other layout ideas and features to add interest. It's intended to be a traditional city centre, and so far it's a modest city that lives in a smallish spare room. So first of all, let's have a look at the current city layout before considering how I might change it and add to it. There's a recent video on my channel which takes a look at the current state of the city, so have a look at that for more details. The old town, representing the medieval town centre, is on one side of my layout, which is here on the left hand side. There's a large central square or plaza which has been built just outside the old town and is in the middle of the table here. And the city continues to develop with a more modern district on the other side of the plaza. The old town is on this side. It has older style buildings which tend to be built of traditional materials like wood, brick and stone. At the moment I just have a few buildings representing the old town area. There's this Katie Corner house which sits at an angle representing an older house. This is one of my MOCs, but was never really finished. There's this monument on the edge of the plaza and the alleyway which is meant to lead into the old town. The old astronomical clock tower is another one of my MOCs and a main feature of the town centre and a tourist attraction. Next to the clock tower is a brownstone townhouse, which is one half of the Lego Creator Expert Pet Shop modular building. And there's actually a half modular space in the corner which needs to be filled in with a suitable building. In the centre of the layout is the main plaza. It has a large fountain in the middle and it's the main open space in the city centre. It also has a number of other features like city signs, a seating area and a sculpture called the 100 Subscribers Monument. On the far side of the square I've currently got my Brickbank MOC, which is a straightened and expanded version of the Lego Creator Expert Brickbank modular building that has the laundrette on one side, and next to it on the other side is the pet shop, which is the other half of the Lego Pet Shop modular building. On the other side of the square, at the moment I've got some more traditional buildings. In the corner is actually a spare space. Then facing onto the square is the Lego Parisian Restaurant modular building. And next to that is another one of my MOCs, which is a yellow townhouse and a more modern apartment building with a cafe on the ground floor and a seating area outside. So far my city's built on just one table, that's 75 by 150 centimetres or about 2.5 by 5 feet. That's quite large, and I can get 3 base plates in the depth of this table and about 6 base plates along the length of the table. That gives my city an initial size of 18 base plates just on this first table. Now I actually bought 2 of these tables, so on the 2 tables I could get 36 base plates. depending on how I use that space for buildings, streets, squares or other open spaces, I could probably get up to 30 modular buildings on the two tables, which should keep me going for a while. But I've only used part of the first table so far, so I really need to look at how to use the rest of the space before considering expanding onto a second table. Now, in one of my previous videos about planning the Lego city, I introduced the use of maquettes, or small architectural models, to plan the city layout. In order to try out various ways to lay out the city, I made these maquettes, or small models, out of Lego, of some of the standard Lego modular buildings and my MOCs. They're built so that each little 4x4 plate represents a 32x32 base plate, and in that space I make a small representation of one standard modular building. I made a scale representation of the tabletops out of cardboard, and they're the same scale as the Lego maquettes. I've marked squares on the cardboard, the same size as the 4x4 plates that represent the 32x32 base plates. So I can position and move around the maquettes that I've made on the piece of card and see how they fit next to each other, the spaces that they leave between them, and how the layout might look. So this is how the city is represented at the moment using this planning system. On this side are the buildings of the old town, in the middle is the plaza and the bank, and on this side are the other buildings. As I think about changes to the city, I'll be moving these around, a bit like chess pieces, and maybe considering shapes for new buildings that I would like to have in the city layout. So first I want to start thinking about how I'm going to develop the old town side of the city over here. The idea for this area is to represent the original medieval old town with a variety of buildings, some of which could be quite old. There's quite a few options for developing this area further. At the moment I've got this row of buildings that face onto the town square. I'm definitely keeping the old astronomical clock. It's one of the main features of my Lego city and built specifically to go here. But this Katie cornered house was a bit of an experiment, and I'm not sure whether to keep it or replace it. Actually, the Parisian restaurant, which I've currently placed on the other side of the square, could go quite nicely here. But there's an alley running down between the two buildings here, so it would be good to put another corner modular building on this corner. None of the regular Lego modular buildings that are corner buildings really suit this location, so I might have to create another custom building for this site. Up here in the corner, I'm not sure about the brownstone house. It's a nice half modular building and it definitely goes in the city somewhere, but I think maybe a more old-fashioned building would do well in this space. I could either make another half modular building to go next to it, or put a full modular building in this corner of the square. So those are the buildings that currently face onto the plaza. Behind them is room for another whole row of modular buildings on regular base plates, but I don't really want just another row of modular buildings. I want to develop this area to represent more of the medieval centre of the old town. That means I'd like to have alleys and narrow streets and pack the buildings quite closely together. It would be good to have more smaller buildings, possibly more than one on a standard base plate, or built on a half modular footprint, or I might have to bend the modular rules slightly, and I don't want all the buildings just facing the same way in a row, so they could be not necessarily in straight lines, more of a higgledy-piggledy, organic or slightly chaotic feel to the alleys and buildings in the old town. I've got lots of ideas for buildings in the old part of town, for example a pub or tavern, a blacksmith's or forge, traditional shops. Maybe I could find space for an old town hall or guild hall, possibly some kind of old town feature like a water fountain, a small market hall, or a cross or statue. There might be room for a very small square or open space, and maybe make some more of the back area of the old astronomical clock tower, possibly making more of the fountain on the side by making it more accessible or visible. I could consider building the Lego Ideas medieval blacksmith set and putting that in here. It's a very nice looking medieval style building, and although it's quite large, I think it could be modified to fit into my city. The blacksmith's is more of a standalone building, as it has a rather irregular shape and some nice features on each side, so I don't think it would fit into a row of buildings. So it's not going to get a place in the row of buildings facing onto the main square. I also like the look of the old blacksmith shop set 3739 from 2002. It's a much smaller building and fits on a base plate that's only 16 by 16 studs, although in its original design it opens out to provide access to the interior. I really like the half-timbered appearance of this set, and although I'm less keen on the bright blue roof, which seems to have been carried forward into the Lego Ideas blacksmiths, there are some nice ideas here that I could use for a MOC. I also like the look of some of the Harry Potter sets and think they could be adapted into nice old buildings. For example, I could start with the buildings in the Lego Harry Potter set Hogsmeade Village Visit, which has two small and rather traditional looking buildings. So I do have some thinking and designing to do about how I want to develop this area further. What sort of buildings and features do you think would go well in an old town centre, bearing in mind the space constraints that I have for my Lego city? So moving on to the plaza in the centre of my city. I'm quite happy with the plaza, but I'm sure there are still some ideas that could improve it. I might consider moving the bank and the laundrette. I have an idea for a nice civic building in this location, which I'll tell you more about another time. Or perhaps the police station would go well in this location. In this corner, the 100 subscriber monument isn't that popular with residents in its current location, so I might look at relocating that. And right in the corner, there's space for a whole new modular building. I'm not sure whether it's going to be a traditional building facing the plaza or a more modern building for the new town area. On the new town side of the city, I'd like to add some more modern buildings and maybe create a kind of business district. This would represent an expansion of the city away from the old medieval quarter. The idea is that this part of the city will contain more modern buildings that are likely to be the size of standard modular buildings or larger, and eventually I might expand this area away from the main plaza onto a separate table. There are a couple of the standard Lego modular buildings that could go well in this area. I could consider putting the detective's office or the police station facing onto the plaza itself. The detective's office is an urban style building, and with the pub on the ground floor and the pool hall on the upper floor, it could fit well into the centre of town. The police station is a civic building and would go well in a central location on this side of the plaza. Then, of course, there's Assembly Square to consider. That's a 1.5 base plate modular building that would take up half of this side of the layout. It has shops and a small fountain with a little mini square that could go nicely next to the main plaza. Any combination of those sets would form an impressive row of buildings facing onto the main plaza. Then behind them I have room for another row of base plates, but again I might not want to put all the building just in straight rows, and I could look for a more interesting arrangement. I would like to include one of my other MOCs in this area. That's currently in development and it's called the Ensgrave building, but it's already going to be 1.5 base plates. So I have to think a bit more about what I can fit in this area before I have to set up my second table. As I explained in a previous video, my Lego city is mostly viewed from the front and this side. So I'll need to consider which way the buildings face and where the main viewpoints and views are going to be. So I'll continue to use these maquettes to try out different ideas and layouts. If I'm building more MOCs for specific locations, I'll do a mini build first to see how it fits and looks in situ. I really like the Lego modular building sets, and as discussed, I may build some of them and place them in a suitable position in the city. But as you can see, I also like to modify them or make my own MOCs. That's very satisfying, but unfortunately it also takes a lot of time. So I think that laying out and building the old part of town and completing a couple of more modern buildings for the new part of town will keep me busy for a while, and will be the main next steps for my Lego city. What do you think? What buildings should be in the old town, and how would you lay it out? Stay tuned to the channel to see how I get on, and don't forget to do the usual YouTube things, like this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. And I hope to see you back again soon as I continue to develop my MOCs and my Lego city.